You're listening to a broadcast from LOCUS Impact Investing. Hello, and welcome to our August feature. This month, we're taking a moment with the team over at Opportunity Virginia as they celebrate their first anniversary with the release of the program's 2019 annual report. Join us as we check in with Director of Project Development, Rebecca Richardson, introduce the initiative to newcomers, and look ahead at what's next for Virginia's premier Opportunity Zone marketplace. And another thing that I'm excited for this time, this is the first instance where we're going to use our title. So, welcome everyone to the LOCast. And with me today, I have Becca of Opportunity Virginia. Becca, can I ask you to introduce yourself to the world?
I would love to. Thank you, Chance. I'm Becca Richardson. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Project Development with Opportunity Virginia. My background is in finance and more recently private equity, and working in the space of community development and community finance has been the most positive life change I've made in a very long time.
That's what I love to hear. Just to get started, we're talking today about opportunity zones and Opportunity Virginia because you guys are reaching or have reached a very important anniversary. And for the uninitiated, what is an opportunity zone?
An opportunity zone, very technically, is a low-income census tract. The Opportunity Zone initiative, if you will, is a tax incentive that was created and defined as part of the Jobs Act in 2017. And then in 2018, early 2018, the IRS put some guardrails and regulations around this. I'm reluctant to call it a program because technically it is not a federal program. It is a tax incentive. But by creating opportunity zones, which are low-income census tracts, and not all low-income census tracts, but some, investors have the opportunity to take their capital gains out of bank accounts and invest them in projects that hopefully contribute positively to communities based on what their needs are. So opportunity zones themselves, like I said, are census tracts. They've been nominated by their states and designated by Treasury. They are set in stone. And for several decades, honestly, the Opportunity Zone program will exist. And investors who put their money into these census tracts by way of either a real estate project or an operating business, making an investment into one of those two things, they will get significant tax benefits. Essentially, this program is designed to incentivize folks who have capital gains to put their money into places and to think about people.
That all sounds wonderful, but where does Opportunity Virginia fit in? Your team represents the Commonwealth's Opportunity Zone marketplace. So what exactly does that mean?
We function like a public-private partnership. To be more specific, Opportunity Virginia is a 4-person team, now a 6-person team because we've gotten 2 amazing interns that are part of Virginia Community Capital and LOCUS Impact Investing, and we function under their umbrella. However, we are funded by the state of Virginia through Virginia Housing, which was formerly known as Virginia Housing Development Authority. It's a real mouthful, but I'm glad that they reduced it to Virginia Housing. And really what that means is that the state of Virginia decided to proactively invest in these opportunity zones. This program was essentially handed to our country as a way to get folks to invest money into areas that need investment. And states have the opportunity to just leave these zones as they are and sort of let markets happen naturally. Or states could do something like Opportunity Virginia did and hire a team with government money to help folks figure out how to use the program. So when you asked what are we in terms of a marketplace specifically, we are like, I tell lots of people that we're like a Yenta. We are a matchmaker. So our different team members have different responsibilities. For example, what I do is I work throughout all of the opportunity zones in Virginia. We have 212 of them, and work with community members and local governments and developers, and I mean, you name it, I call them different stakeholders. That's how I reference them all en masse, and figure out what all are the projects that are going to happen, that need to happen, that folks have as just sort of an embryo of an idea in their mind, and help them figure out, how can we make these opportunity zone projects? And from that point, we develop a pipeline of projects. And at the same time, my colleague Jay Beekman, he does the same thing with investors. He's creating and maintaining a network of investors who are interested in impact investing. They are also interested in getting the tax benefit of the program. But I would venture to say that impact investing does tend to have a little bit of a lower market or a lower return than market rate investments. So therefore, investors who are investing in these types of projects typically do have a bit of an expectation that the total return might be lower than a market return. So essentially, Jay's got the investors, I've got the projects. In a perfect world, we're just going to match them up. We're going to make all of these projects happen, and Virginia's going to thrive. That's the goal. But reality is often very different. And you mentioned that we're celebrating a big milestone, and that is our first anniversary as a team. And we have had a lot of learnings in this first year about what it's really like to help capitalism happen in a way that involves all parts of communities, and that is intentional, and that is thoughtful, and is, in theory, counter to some of the other ways that this incentive has been used.
Let's talk about, I guess, Opportunity Virginia's vision of capitalism. When you went on your star-studded launch in October 2019, you guys developed a list of, I believe, 8 principles that your team is kind of using as its lodestar. So can you talk a little bit about how these principles are guiding your kind of day-to-day activities with Opportunity Virginia?
I would say that all 8 of our principles could be applied to both the community development side of what we do and to the investor development side of what we do. So, for example, when I'm operating in my day, I speak to such a wide variety of folks. And in every conversation, there is a very significant amount of education that happens. There is not a single stakeholder that's going to feel comfortable doing any kind of transaction in the Opportunity Zone marketplace if they don't understand the program. So ensuring fair and equitable access. I want to give some examples of ways that I think about doing that. Like I said, everyone needs access to information. And if only folks who have a tremendous amount of capital and quote unquote power have access to ways and instructions on how to translate confusing tax regulations, then they're going to drive what happens in community development. That's not equitable, if you ask me. So what we want to do is we want community members to feel comfortable understanding this program so that they can participate in the program and so that they can be part of the conversation. We used to host in person, and now we host virtual Opportunity Zone workshops where everyone is invited. And we trick everyone into coming by calling it an educational opportunity. And we do indeed provide some good education on the Opportunity Zone program. But if you ask me, the most important thing that happens in these meetings is the conversation after the presentation. Folks start to ask questions, and then folks realize that everybody's got a lack of understanding. And folks also get the opportunity not just to ask me questions, but to talk to each other. And it's happening more and more virtually. It's been a learning curve since we've been in the pandemic to figure out how to get that magic in the room when the room is a screen. But we're getting there. When we have a variety and a wide scope of stakeholders at the table, then we're going to have projects that are developed in communities that everyone gets to benefit from. If we don't have low-income folks, Black folks, if we don't have community leaders and organizers, if we don't have economic developers, investors, business owners, if we don't have them all at the table sharing information, then the projects that happen in opportunity zones and just like it can happen in any community are going to be ones that folks feel were bulldozing or maybe were just put there for the purpose of getting tax revenue for a city. What I want to do is create conversations and create connections and give the economic development authorities and local governments the opportunity to engage more with their constituents, and for anyone who's coming into a community to feel the reminder to ask the communities what they want and what they need so that projects can be developed around the community's needs. I also want to say, with regards to Jay's work, it's interesting because I work a lot more directly with larger community groups than Jay might if you think about it on paper. Mm-hmm. But Jay has a really interesting role and opportunity as well because he's working with investors. And at the end of the day, when you invest in an opportunity zone project, you're investing equity. This program is for capital gains. That is equity. Right. So essentially what we're doing is private equity. We're helping private equity transactions getting to the finish line. We sort of get folks as far as we can and then hand them over to lawyers. But what Jay gets to do is create transparency. So in private equity, there is a very big lack of transparency across the board. To even have access to what we call an offering memorandum, which is essentially a guidebook to an investment opportunity, you have to be an accredited investor often, which means that you have a certain dollar amount of assets and or a certain income level. They're not typically things that you can just go on the internet and say, oh, this is interesting. Here's a whole list of things I can invest my $25 into. So Jay is creating transparency by talking about our projects with as many folks as he can. And Opportunity Virginia's online exchange, which is offered through the Opportunity Exchange, which is the name of a platform and is a fantastic organization itself, is an online platform where anyone, it could be a developer, it could be an owner of a property, it could be a local government representative, can go online and create postings of real estate that's available, of businesses, their pitch decks, of ideas, of concepts, of any type of project that could exist in an opportunity zone that folks could put their money into. And I know that it sounds very simple, but in the world of private equity, having such transparency of projects is a big deal. And what we want to do is encourage folks who have the inclination to do impact investing to be able to do that. And by giving them more opportunities, we're making a difference, I hope, in communities.
Would it be fair to say that when it comes to impact investing specifically, that lack of transparency was a barrier to kind of propagating the impact investing practice?
Absolutely. Yes. The lack of transparency is a huge barrier to entry in terms of investing in general when it comes to private equity. You know, it's not like the stock market. There is no single place where you can go for information in private equity investing. And then when you go even further into the niche of impact investing, if you will, and to define impact investing, that is to invest your money into a project that presumably has a positive social, environmental, equity impact on a community. Anyway, to get to get further into that niche it becomes harder and harder to find the projects that exist. So essentially it ends up being, who do you know and what are your connections? We want to dismantle that system to some degree as much as we can by making it less word of mouth and who do you know, and more about this information is aggregated in a way that is available and accessible to as many people as we can get the word out to.
Making it a much friendlier marketplace.
Yes.
So I guess one of the things that I also want to expand on is how your view of the work has changed over time. Like how has your view of the field sort of shifted over time, if it has?
It's shifted significantly. And I think if I'm honest, what has shifted really has been my expectations of the program and of the pace in which this program is going to be successful. And I do believe that this program is going to be successful. My expectations of the first year were that we would help stakeholders connect and that we would get X number of projects to the point of closing, which means to the point of, signing documents and beginning working together, investors and project sponsors, if you will. I thought by the end of the first year, we're going to have a project closed in all of these different categories. What I did not realize up front was that no one was anywhere near closing on a project, regardless of whether or not we had introduced them to each other. And the reason was that there was a huge lack of understanding of the program itself. And that is because the IRS came out with regulations around the program in pieces. There were different tranches of information that were released several months apart from each other. If we only look at the major tranches, essentially there were three. There was an initial one that was very focused on real estate, and it was less than 20 pages long. There was a second tranche that added a lot more information about operating businesses that was significantly longer. And then there was a third tranche that was released at the very end of 2019 in December that aggregated the first two documents that originally you had to look at side by side, because the second one did not reiterate the first one, but just referenced sections. So you had to go back and forth between these two documents. It was a nightmare. And then finally, in December, we got these final regulations, and it's a document that is over 500 pages long. And as you can imagine, contributes to the lack of understanding of this program. So we had to spend the first year getting into it with everyone. We ourselves daily would be texting each other, emailing each other, running across the office to each other to try and clarify our own understanding of the program. And here we are, representatives. So it was very easy to empathize with the stakeholders who often felt a little embarrassed to raise their hand and ask questions. So as you can imagine, a lot wasn't happening in the first year, except for the things that were going to happen anyway. And those things were the projects that developers across the country, usually national developers who already were used to creating private equity funds, just replicated in opportunity zones and called them opportunity zone funds. And those were typically projects that were made of market rate and luxury housing, projects that don't typically add a lot of value to the lower income folks in a low income census tract. Also things like storage units. That was a big investment trend with those funds in the very beginning of the program. I know this because I used to work on that side of the program in private equity. I was on the dark side prior to this. The early stage projects, the ones that did happen and that gave this program the reputation that I would say it currently has, are the ones that were going to happen and that were implemented by folks who had the privilege of access to lawyers, money, investors, and folks to help them put the pieces of the puzzle together. So we, in turn, ended up with a lot of articles published in the New York Times and all kinds of other publications about how the Opportunity Zone program is one that was created for and is used by rich individuals as a tax shelter for their capital gains. And honestly, I am not going to argue that it was used for that. I can't speak to the intent. I wasn't in the room when it happened. But I will say that happened, and it still is happening. However, the state of Virginia invested in Opportunity Virginia for the purpose of empowering stakeholders to create Opportunity Zone projects that are going to make a difference, a positive difference in Virginia communities. To get back to your question, we had to educate folks. We had to educate ourselves. And so we spent the first year saying, we sort of had to put all of our agendas down. We had to sort of close the book, set it aside, and say, let's dig in together. And what that meant was doing countless educational sessions with stakeholder parties, and the best ones, like I mentioned to you earlier, were the ones where we did it in aggregate, where the stakeholder parties were in the room together, because folks got to sort of ask questions to each other and say, okay, well, if I'm an investor and I'm investing in this, what does that mean to you as a business? There are a lot of different ways that that folks can work together. And to do so, they need to sort of find a way. They need folks like us to bring them together, but also they need to sort of level set with their understanding of the program. What I learned over our first year was that my more realistic expectation of our objective as a team was to provide access to education, access to tools, access to networking, and therefore empower all of the stakeholders across the board to start the process of making Opportunity Zone projects snowball from early stage to middle, or even if we're lucky, later stage.
It's a Herculean lift to untangle all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we add to that a lot of ongoing challenges in the ecosystem, namely COVID and a resurgence in the struggle for equality. Where then does Opportunity Virginia go in the next year?
That's a really good question. I mean, just straight off the bat, being honest, it's very difficult. My number one strategy with regard to creating community development focused Opportunity Zone projects, or at least participating in them, was formerly all about community engagement meetings and community engagement gatherings. And that is so much more difficult, as we all know now. So everything's happening over Zoom and over the phone. And what that looks like for me is I have to be more intentional about the projects that I work on and about how available I make myself to the folks that are doing the projects. So, for example, if I could choose one project to make happen in this year, it would be an affordable housing community, even more specifically, likely a mixed income, affordable and workforce housing community in Virginia, or more, one or more. And so what I'm doing is I'm spending a certain amount of my time being very focused on that goal. And what that looks like is reaching out to developers nationally. And I want to give credit to my incredible intern, Alan, who is an urban planning major at University of Virginia. And Alan did the outreach to national developers saying, look, here's a resource that Virginia invested in. We can connect you to localities and investors in Virginia And are you interested in this state and in affordable and workforce housing? And we've gotten a good solid handful of responses. And what we're doing now is we're sort of doing intakes, if you will, intake interviews with these developers and saying, what is your approach? How do you serve the communities? What are your, do you have examples of opportunity zone projects that had affordable or mixed income housing in other states? Do you know how to do it? And to find these developers that have an operating history of serving communities in a positive way and introducing those developers to localities so that they can get some deals done and figure out what are their synergies. And at the end of the day, the developer might be their own opportunity zone investor, or there might be a gap in the funding of the project that can allow for other investors to be involved in the projects as well. So I don't want to say that I'm not helping all the opportunity zone projects there are, because I will talk to anyone who's interested in geeking out on opportunity zone projects with me. But I think that Virginia has a very large gap of available and high quality, affordable and workforce housing. And that is something that, from an equity perspective and just from the perspective of being a community member in this Commonwealth, I want to contribute to, what's the word? What's the opposite of widening?
Narrowing?
I want to contribute to narrowing that gap.
Why don't we geek out on opportunity zone projects for a second? In the annual report, we do lay out some opportunity zone projects, the Fredericksburg Food Co-op, for instance. Can I ask you then to describe for us some examples of the kind of opportunity zone projects that we want to see?
Sure. My favorite is the Vaughn Furniture Building project in Galax, Virginia. I have a real soft spot in my heart for this project because I feel really inspired by the local government in Galax, Virginia, in the way that as a group, their city council as well as their mayor, they are very collaborative in the way that they work together and the way that they work with their community. So in this project, there's a really giant and beautiful building called the Vaughn Furniture Building. It is over 400,000 square feet, which some people call a white elephant of a building. And this incredible facility provided so many jobs to folks back in the day. And it was a furniture manufacturing company owned by the Vaughn family. And the Vaughn family is still living in Galax, and the company still owns that building. And so the Vaughn family, together with the owners of the business, along with the local government, have decided, let's work as a group and make something of this vacant building and make it a community center so that it can provide housing and any other kind of amenities based on what the community tells us they want, and we will create it. So essentially what they did was, with the help of Opportunity Appalachia, who gave them grant money, they used that grant money to hire a team of service providers. Opportunity Virginia is one of them, and we are going to help them do community engagement to find out from community members what would make their lives better. This collaborative group wants not only to collaborate with each other, but they want to open the doors. They want to fling the doors open and say, tell us what you need. This is a public-private partnership. Think about it. This is a privately owned building. And the locality is putting their resources into this project, their time, and also their money. And they're going to ask their members, what can this building, how can we serve you with this building? And once we have a vision for what this building should be based on community needs, we're going to market it to developers and say, here's an opportunity to invest in something really incredible. And you are going to walk into a scenario where you have the full support of the local government and the community to make this thing, which is sort of a dream come true for developers, because sometimes it can be really hard to get ideas passed by different groups. And so I love this project because while it's early stage and while it's not something that is going to happen in a short time, it is going to have a tremendous positive impact on the community.
Rebecca, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. This has been absolutely fascinating, and we're going to have to do a follow-up on Opportunity Zones and Opportunity Virginia at some point. And to also do a shameless plug for the Opportunity Virginia Annual Report. You can find more examples about great Opportunity Zone projects showing how this program can work. But Rebecca, before we sign off, is there anything that you want to plug?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. I want to remind listeners that one stakeholder group that is often not mentioned in the mainstream narrative of Opportunity Zone project is philanthropy. And Locus Impact Investing serves philanthropies all over the country in the way that they help these philanthropies deploy their assets in a place-based manner, in a thoughtful manner. Philanthropies, while they're not going to get the benefits, the tax benefits of the projects that happen in Opportunity Zones, the types of projects that we're working on, like the Galax one that I described, are fantastic opportunities for philanthropies to plug in and support projects that are happening in Opportunity Zones. So I just want to remind the philanthropies that are listening, as well as other stakeholders, I want to remind folks to reach out to philanthropies both locally and nationally and give them the opportunity to hear about your projects too.
And with that, again, Becca, thank you so much for joining me. For anyone interested in hearing more from us over at LOCUS and Opportunity Virginia, we have 2 newsletters. You can connect with us via our website or on social media, and we will link to all of that in the descriptions below. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a great one.